Everyone who signed in. Thank you very much for attending our Framing the Future program for July 2023. My name is Gary Allen with the Maryland Forestry Foundation, and the foundation is your host for this series of webinars on issues that will frame the future of discussion, policy, program, and project for forestry in Maryland, we believe, for years to come. I want to welcome all of you for joining us today and say thank you, and remind all of you that the show is being recorded. It will be made available this fall on the new Forestry Board, marylandforestry.org website. That website is now in transition. We expect to launch a new website in September, and I apologize for all of you who've been looking for previous webinars in our series because the posting of those has been delayed due to some technical issues with our present website. But having committed to upgrade the site and make these available, I think you'll be able to find all, I think there's about 18 or 19 of them that are currently have been completed in the past. So join us in the fall for all of them. But in the meantime, we're very pleased to have you with us today for a subject that is deeply relevant to many of you, focusing on current threats to forestry in Maryland. And we have assembled a very excellent panel today. So I'm going to turn to our moderator, Megan Carr, who's been moderating all of these sessions. Many of you have joined us before and have met her before, and turn it over to Megan to introduce the panel and describe the subject in a little bit more detail. Megan, take it away.
Great. Thanks very much, Gary. Yeah, I'm Megan Carr here joining the Maryland Forestry Foundation, also from Baltimore City Forestry, where we are becoming more and more engaged in this month's topic. So, of course, this month we are discussing the spotted lanternfly. Do want to make some quick housekeeping notes for our attendees. I know this is a topic that a lot of folks have a great deal of interest in, and I'm sure a number of questions as well. So for all of those questions that you would like our panelists to answer, please enter those into the Q&A chat box. Some of our panelists may be able to answer those via text throughout the session, and we will discuss them as we have time for at the end of today's session. So spotted lanternfly, it's only been known in North America for less than a decade, and in that time it's gained significant attention, thanks in part to effective messaging campaigns, and it's also just a really eye-catching insect. And our understanding of this insect has evolved significantly as the population has expanded. So to get us up to date on all of the things that we can expect from our new neighbor, we are joined by two experts this month. First up, we're joined by Emily Zobel. She's the Senior Agent Associate for the Ag and Food System for the University of Maryland Extension in Dorchester County. She received her master's in entomology from the University of Maryland College Park, and her current focus areas are sustainable vegetable production, pesticide safety, and integrated pest management. She is also 1/3 of the Garden Time podcast, that's THYME, a monthly podcast that helps people learn how to get down and dirty in their gardens. So thank you, Emily.
Thanks for having me. Do you want me to go ahead and go first and share, or did you want to introduce Kenton?
Oh, we'll introduce Kenton right before he speaks, so take it away.
Okay, cool. Let me get my screen sharing going. It's always fun when you have two screens. Okay.
Emily, you're no longer sharing. Did you change something?
Yeah, my PowerPoint just crashed on me. So hang on one sec. It was bound to happen. It went so smoothly in the test run, but there you go. I think that should work.
That looks great.
Awesome. Okay. So thank you guys for having me. Again, my name is Emily Zobel. So at this time, as I'm sort of starting this, if you guys need to adjust your volume or anything like that, I think at this point, most of us are used to Zoom, but take a few minutes and do that. as well as I start just doing some introductory information. So today we're going to talk about spotted lanternfly. So spotted lanternfly is an invasive plant hopper. So it is in the insect order Cteniptera, which means that it has a piercing, sucking mouth part. And you can kind of see it on the image here up at the top with the laser. So it's underneath the body right here. So what this means is this insect isn't going to do any type of chewing damage, but it's going to be feeding on the sap of plants, specifically trees, are kind of what you guys are most concerned about. So it is native to China, India, and Vietnam, and it was actually found to be invasive into Korea back in 2004. So it has spread in Korea as well. We first found it here in the United States in 2015 in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and since then it has spread to the following states, Maryland included, most of the Mid-Atlantic, and then it's slowly kind of making its way across the country. The biggest concern kind of at this point is containment more than anything else. At this point, it's been here too long for kind of eradication. So containment is kind of the main thing. And you can see from the map here, which was made by the fantastic Kenton, who will talk after me. I appreciate you making this because this comes in handy every time. Pretty much every county in Maryland has found spotted lanternflies, but not all of them are underneath quarantine yet. So he'll talk more about what quarantine is and what that means for you guys. But just note that at this point, adults and nymphs have been found in every county. Whether or not there's a breeding population in every county in Maryland is still kind of up in the air. And he'll probably go over more of that in detail, since when people find them, they're checking in with MDA more so than with Extension, which is where I work. So I'm going to mainly focus on going over some of the biology of spotted lanternfly and then some things you can do kind of in your own home to control it. In all likelihood, trying to control this in a forest setting is going to be really limited. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. So luckily, we only get one generation of this per year, and it's a plant hopper, so it does incomplete metamorphosis. So we're not having a pupae stage in any of this. So the eggs will get laid in the fall. It will overwinter in the egg stage. We get the nymphs hatching in that spring to early summer. And then you have late star nymphs, and then they become adults mid-July. So about this time is when we should start seeing these last or fourth instar nymphs becoming adults. So as we progress through the summer is when you would start to see adults. And this is when you're really going to start to see heavy feeding damage, which we'll talk about in a sec as well. So the adults are fairly good in size. They're about 1 inch and about ½ inch wide. So you can see a picture. So this is an adult male thumb. So like my hands are pretty tiny, so it would look way bigger compared, but this was taken by Mike Raup at University of Maryland Extension. So that's his thumb. So you can see comparatively, it's a pretty good size insect. It does have some very striking colors to it. So when it is at rest, its wings are folded. So you have this kind of Dalmatian, I call it Dalmatian spots, with this like brick type pattern at the end of its wings. But when they're spread out, you have this bright flash of red and then that yellow abdomen. And if you look at it from underneath, here is that proboscis. So again, it's a piercing, sucking insect, not chewing. So this photo, you can see it really well, and this striking kind of yellow coloration. So these are typically what I would consider, once people know what they're looking for, it's noticeable. But a lot of times when people see this in the newspaper or something like that, and they just describe it as a insect with red and black and white and polka dots, you start to get a lot of insects that kind of fall into that are naturally found here in Maryland. So that's where kind of defining it in a little bit more detail comes in handy. So the nymphs are what most people have been seeing throughout the whole spring. Early instar nymphs are all black with these kind of white, I call them domino spots, because you can see that they match up. Like it's symmetrical compared to other insects. It's kind of all scattered all over the place. And then that last instar, or the fourth one, is going to be bright red with the white dots. So this is going to be the one that most people are going to be seeing about now. And here's some nymphs that are just crawling up and down a stem. And these guys scurry really quickly up and down stems. It takes them about 8 to 10 weeks to go from this first instar all the way to that adult stage. And they have 4 molts or 4 instars in order to do this. These guys do have a feigning kind of defense mechanism. So if you were to find them on kind of underbrush plants or roses or something like that in that nymph stage, besides scurrying up and down, if they were disturbed, a lot of them would drop off as well, which sometimes is makes it a little bit trickier to kind of identify them or to see them, because people will see it out of their corner of the eye moving and then it fades off and they can't find it in like their mulch and stuff. So sometimes it can get a little lost in all of it. So here's another picture of kind of what the nymphs look like, and they're a little dried up, but here would be our first, second, third, and then fourth. And again, when people hear descriptions of these, particularly in things like newspapers or on the news when they're not looking at a photo, they can easily get confused with other insects that we have. So again, if you're describing it's a small insect, it's round, it's black and red with polka dots, people may confuse them for some of our other species, like our green stink bug and our 2-spotted stink bug. And both of these are native. And in the case of the 2-spotted, this is predatory. So this is a beneficial one that you would want in your garden. You would want it in your landscape. You want it in kind of the forest underbrush. The green one is still beneficial because it feeds lots of animals, but it would feed on plants. But neither one of these is going to be damaging to trees the same way the spotted lanternfly is. So just make a note that when we're describing this, we really kind of want to show pictures and talk about it in a way that clarifies which insect people could potentially be identifying. So the egg masses are unique in how they look, but they are very camouflaged. So here we have an adult female, she's laying eggs. They do this interesting defense mechanism where here's naked eggs, but she'll create this waxy coat that goes over them, which is what you're seeing on this one up here. And you can see it camouflages greatly into this tree. Like if you weren't really close, you wouldn't notice it. And this will start off very light colored, and then as it ages will turn kind of gray. And then sometimes it'll get crackly and dried the way that this one up here is. So here's the uncovered ones and then the covered ones, but they've dried out. Now, one of the bad things about this is when these insect lays eggs, they all like to lay eggs together. So here we see a lamppost that is just covered, and each one of these egg masses can have anywhere from 20 to 50 to even more eggs, depending on how recently she's made it and the age of the female spotted lanternfly. So you can see that in this small little cluster overwintering, this could give havoc to lots and lots of them. In this case, this was in a grape vineyard yard, so this was very detrimental to the crop that they were having. One thing that we have been asking the public to do, or even private landowners who have encountered this, is to scrape those egg masses off using an old credit card or a razor blade into a baggie with rubbing alcohol and smashing them. And this works well when you're working in kind of a park setting or a farm setting or a backyard setting. But again, in a large forest, you guys aren't going to go out there and hand scrape eggs. So what are the spotted lanternfly's host plants? So because it is from China and India and Vietnam, tree of heaven, which is a native plant from there that is also invasive over here, is one that they oftentimes flock to, particularly in their adult stage. So it's a very easy one to kind of find them on where they have been spread to. So from the agriculture point of view, the crops that we're most concerned about with spotted lanternfly feeding on would be things like grapes, hops, apples, and then other stone fruits. So assuming everyone on here is 21, this is the point where I sort of joke about this insect is going to come for your wine, it's going to come for your beer, and it's going to come for your hard ciders. So it really just is going to leave you with the grain alcohols. So that alone is enough to make a lot of people start to take caution of this. But as we can see, there's a fair amount of other trees that they have found the adults feeding on. The nymphs have been found feeding on a lot of the kind of herbaceous understory plants. Roses in particular is one that the nymphs really like to feed on. We have found them in grain crops, on sunflowers, and in vegetable crops. But Penn State has done some studies and they found that while if they're caged on these crops, they'll cause feeding damage, but they're not finding high enough populations on them that are not caged, meaning if given the choice, these insects are not preferring to feed on these types of crops. They're preferring the woody plants. And as you can see from this picture here, so all of these, this is not an apple tree with weird bark. These are all adult spotted lanternflies. So none of them are feeding on the fruit, but what they're doing is they are feeding on the sugar content, and in return that changes the sugar content for the grapes or the apples, which if you're making wine, that's really important because you need the sugar content for the fermentation. And for apples, that can really reduce the quality of the apple, because if you go to bite into something like a sweet apple and it doesn't have any sugar to it, your customers are not going to be happy with it. So both the adults and the nymphs, again, are hemipterous, so they have a piercing, sucking mouth part. So they are feeding on the xylem and the phloem of the plant themselves. So again, we're not going to get any chewing damage from these guys. We're going to have that sap sucking. So there's two different types of damage that these insects can cause. So one is the direct feeding, which is taking away the sugar and the nutrients from the plant itself. And the second way that they damage plants is through what we call honeydew production. So when you feed on something that's high in sugar and high in water and low in nutrients, you have to eat a lot of it to get the actual nutrients we need. So think of it as like if you have a child and you're only feeding them like sugary things, but you want them to get enough vitamin C, you're going to have to feed them a lot of like sugary popsicles to get that vitamin C. It's the same concept here. So because that insect is ingesting so much water and so much sugar, they are pooping sugar water, or honeydew is what the entomological term of it out. And what happens is this honeydew coats things. It's a liquid, it's shiny, it's kind of sticky. If you've ever parked your car underneath a tree with aphids, you've probably had this encounter. So what you get is the base around all these trees has this sticky substance that eventually gets mold on it. The mold doesn't penetrate the bark of the tree. It doesn't harm the tree in that sense, but it gets all over the base. You can see it all over the leaves and the base on this tree as well. This will reduce photosynthesis on the leaves, as well as it brings in kind of secondary pests. So things like ants and wasps will come in and feed on this. They also did a study up in Pennsylvania where they found at the end of the season, honeybees were collecting the city mold, and it was making the honey have an odd taste when they harvest it in the following kind of spring. So again, it's affecting your honey production. So one thing to note with these is that these guys don't like to feed alone. This is a giant family reunion barbecue type setting. So again, this entire tree, not a weird bark. Those are all adult lanternflies. So this you can see is definitely an issue for a homeowner perspective, or in a neighborhood, or if any of you guys are working in kind of like community parks or more urban centered areas, where you're going to have people that are going to be walking around and seeing this on trees or encountering them. It's a nuisance type pest. I know there were reports up in Cecil County where people had these on trees and the honeydew was raining down on porches, and it was making the porches, like the wood on the porch, really slick. And I know at least one person fell because of it. So there can be like some safety concerns with that. So for control, luckily, at least up in Pennsylvania, they are finding that insects and birds and other things have started to pick up on these guys. So we do have some biocontrol happening. So in the case of the picture here, we see a wheel bug that is eating a nymph. So that's nice because that means our environment is naturally starting to pick this up. You can do things like circle traps around landscape trees. So again, this would be more like parks or individual homeowners. Obviously, going out and putting circle traps around every tree in a forest is not logical and would not make sense. So this is kind of more of those individual tree type settings. When it comes to sprays, horticultural oil can be applied to those eggs early on. Scraping is an option for that, but if you've got kind of large amounts of those eggs, you can smother them out with horticulture oil. They found that it can penetrate through that waxy substance. It may take a few sprays in order to do it. There are some insecticides that can be used as well, but it's worth noting that Penn State did a study where they surveyed all the trees within, I want to say, a quarter mile, and found that certain trees were more prone to spotted lanternfly feeding than others. So those would be the trees that you would want to target. So rather than spraying every tree, you would want to hunt down kind of these more desirable trees. And in this case, things like that tree of heaven or maples. In the Penn State study, while only 31% of the trees that were in the area they were sampling were maple trees, 94% of the spotted lanternfly population was on those maple trees. And you can go on Penn State Extension to look at the study, or my email will be later on, and you can shoot me an email and I'm happy to send the link to you. But you can kind of see they ranked the trees that they found them on. So if you were encountering those trees in areas, those would be the ones that you would want to focus your control methods on, because that's where they're likely going to be. There are some contact insecticides. So these would be ones that would need to be applied directly to the insect. And this can work on both nymphs and adults. With nymphs, you would probably need to make at least 2 applications because they would reinfest the plants, as well as there are some systemic insecticides. So these would be ones that you would do as drenches that the trees presumably would take up, because again, these are sap feeders. So then the insects would ingest it in that way. Penn State has a really good list on the ones that they found were effective and not effective. And we have a list on our website as well. And then if anyone in here works or owns, has a vineyard on the side, they do have a threshold for when you would want to control it on your grapes. They typically find it as an edge pest. So you'd hunt around the edges, and about 10 to 20 adults or nymphs per vine would be when you could justify spraying it from a commercial standpoint there. So here's kind of a breakdown on different management options you would have throughout the year. So not moving spotted lanternfly in any of the life cycle is kind of the biggest one that we're all promoting, because again, we want to stop the spread of spotted lanternfly. You can always scrape and destroy eggs. Spraying those eggs with horticulture oil works in that like late winter into early spring. Once they hatch, the circle traps are great, and then the contact and systemic insecticides are ideally what you can do. One thing that I'd encourage you guys to do, or anyone who is also in the forestry industry, is Virginia Forestry Association came out with this, which is a spotted lanternfly logger inspection checklist. So the idea here is that you're not necessarily killing spotted lanternfly, but you're checking your equipment as you're moving from one area to another to make sure that you're not carrying them with you. And you can download this, or my email will be on the next slide. So you can email me, and I am happy to share the link for this as well, that you guys can have to disperse amongst yourself or anyone that you know that works in the logging industry. So with that, there's my sources for my information, as well as my contact information. I know this was kind of quick and a brief overview, but hopefully this helps you guys be able to recognize this insect pest.
That's great. Thank you very much, Emily, for a lot of great information in a very condensed space and some truly alarming photos. Like the bark has me, the faux bark has me kind of squicked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would encourage folks to grab a quick screenshot so they can follow up with you, and we will transition over to our next speaker. So we are also joined with Kenton Sumter, who is an entomologist with the Maryland Department of Agriculture and is the coordinator for the Spotted Lanternfly program. He became interested in entomology by way of a research project he did in Panama during undergrad at Frostburg State University. And after exposure to the Forest Pest Management program during his term in the Maryland Conservation Corps, he decided to pursue forest pest management in graduate school. He joined the lab of Dr. Scott Salem at Virginia Tech and obtained an MS in entomology. And after a few years, he was able to land the job he holds now, working to manage spotted lanternfly in Maryland. So all yours, Kenton.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, so I am exclusively lanternfly. This is my whole bag. So if anyone's got any questions about these bugs or kind of what state's doing, I can try and answer them right here. I'm probably going to hit some of the same stuff that Emily did, so hopefully folks can kind of bear with me through that. But I'm going to get started. A lot of what I want to go and talk about. Boop, whoops, I was scrolling through my own presentation. A lot of what I want to go and talk about is more of the state operations side of things, so that people can get an idea of what our priorities are and what we're trying to do, and just some of the progress on some of the biological control research that's happened. So Emily talked about some of the impacts, and I kind of want to reiterate, the litmus for the state's activities is broken down into about 3 different factors. The first one being economic. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture did a very good economical impact assessment, economic impact assessment of what spotted lanternfly could cost the state. Their ballpark, I think, was even with management, it could still cost up to $325 million annually when all of the different damages from lanternfly are taken into account. Maryland has not done any kind of economic assessment of what lanternfly is costing the state, but we can say, at least anecdotally, that growers, especially vineyard owners and operators, are experiencing immense pressure from spotted lanternfly, and they will have to either pass those costs on or eat them, and it's having an effect. And by way of emphasizing the point, Maryland's wine industry contributes about $3 billion to the economy, which is really an astounding number. But when you see the breakdown, it all kind of makes sense. And that's only one industry that lanternfly is known to be a bad influence on. We're worried that they could have a bad influence also on nurseries, orchards, and the forestry field, especially with new research that's come out, which is this next little point down here that I have. Recent research has shown that feeding by spotted lanternfly does have the capability to suppress the physiology in a couple different ways, the metabolic physiology of the trees on which it feeds. And this particular study was done with only 4 different tree species, but there was evidence that it has the capability of suppressing photosynthesis, suppressing gas exchange, potentially even inhibiting growth in some of the tree species. And the resistance of certain trees to feeding was different, but it's worth a read. I'd recommend checking it out. Lavely et al. It's a good paper, and the link right there is available for anybody that's interested in reading that. It's free, and that's Frontiers of Insect Science is the journal that it was published in. So other than an economic and ecological pest, we are almost more concerned with the role spotted lanternfly plays as a public nuisance. This is the one that most Marylanders are encountering, and the one that I personally feel like is the biggest problem lanternfly poses. People in heavily infested areas say that they cannot go outside. They just get dive bombed by thousands of lanternflies. You know, they're clinging to the sides of people's houses. The honeydew that they're producing is causing mold to grow, attracting wasps. It is just kind of an all-around disgusting pest to have to live beside. Luckily, they're not poisoning anybody, they're not transmitting diseases, and they're not really killing plants either. What we've seen is that they are a stressor on plants, but they are not a primary agent of plant death. We do get that complaint a lot, though. It's hard to verify if people are actually losing ornamentals or vines, grapevines to lanternfly feeding. There's been a lot of abiotic factors that have influenced plant health this last year, and some people might be experiencing, lanternfly feeding, but also really high temperatures, intense drought, fluctuating temperatures that have all contributed to their plants being less than healthy. But nevertheless, lanternfly is a heavy feeder, especially as adults. They aren't a good influence on the plants. They're not doing nothing. And grape, this is just for anybody that's kind of interested. I'd recommend checking out Harner et al. It is a kind of a breakdown about the magic number of how many lanternfly that you would find on a grapevine and when the bad impacts begin. Basically, about 8 insects feeding on a grapevine means that it's going to start suffering. Below that, the threshold for treatment may be low enough that you can just kind of let it be. At 8 or above is when vineyard owners are going to begin treating. That's just a breakdown of what's going to come next. So we'll skip on past. This is a very handy map. I recommend anybody that's interested regularly check the Integrated Pest Management Program from New York. This is put on, I believe, by Cornell, and it is contributed to by every single state that is experiencing spotted lanternfly. It has a breakdown of identified infestations where all life stages have been discovered, hitchhikers, where we've just kind of found like one life stage and haven't been able to verify that they're reproducing, And then it also shows the quarantines that states have established around their infested counties. The blue is the infestations, the purple dots are the hitchhikers, and the red lines are the quarantines. And as you can see, Lanternfly has made itself felt in the entire mid-Atlantic region. It's up in New England, it's out to the Great Lakes, and it's down as far south as North Carolina. It's been spread primarily by human-mediated transportation pathways. Cars, trucks, and especially rail are the really big movers for spotted lanternfly. And it hitchhikes just at the drop of a hat. It'll be on a car and headed down the road. In Maryland, a lot of what we tried to go and do to regulate the movement of lanternfly has been to establish a quarantine. This quarantine was first put in 2019 and has been expanded twice since then. It encompasses 18 out of our 24 counties now. And pretty much in every single county where we have a quarantine, we have an infestation, or at least, we've identified a reproducing population. The only one that kind of stands out is Calvert. We've not actually, no, I take it back. We have found lanternfly in Calvert. So yes, every single one of those has every life stage represented. The purpose of this is basically to let us target, it gives us a few more powers for doing surveys, but also lets us target businesses and public agencies, for that matter, that we want to go and bring onto our spotted lanternfly permitting program. And it also kind of directs our public outreach efforts to when people are inside the quarantine, we want to make extra sure that we're getting information to them to either get a permit for their business or to be aware of what lanternfly looks like and report it when they see it, step on it, all the usual stuff. This quarantine isn't going to be changed until next year. We might add more counties if Charles or St. Mary's gets infested, then we'll go and add those guys. But this is where it will stand for the rest of the year. This is a very rough breakdown of where we're finding the heaviest infestations. If I had to put a new color on here, I would do one for Baltimore City and Baltimore County. Those are the two most infested two most infested places in Maryland this year. That's a little different from last year, which you'll see soon in the next couple slides. We're seeing shifts in the population that I don't have a good explanation for. It was extremely heavy in Hagerstown last year. It's lighter now in Hagerstown. And it's much, much heavier in Baltimore County and Baltimore City. A lot of the older historic infestations in Hartford and Cecil seem to have fallen off a little bit. That could be a number of different factors, ranging from increased pressure on the lanternfly population to fatigue with reporting by Marylanders. So I wish I knew, but unfortunately, I just don't have quantitative data on that. What we do have is our survey. This is a really cool tool we implemented back in 2021. Trying to get people to come on and do reporting through our website on our survey and letting us know where they're finding lanternfly, how many, what properties, giving some contact information. Unfortunately, there's so many reports that we don't respond back to people that report through this survey. If people are interested in management questions or have concerns, they need to either email us or call us on the phone. This survey had 11,500 responses at the end of last year, and we just can't comb through those to identify people that are asking questions through the survey. But it's a very, very cool tool to see how Marylanders are reporting and kind of where lanternfly are most heavy in the state. So this is from last year. I'll post up 2023 when the year is over, but it does give you an indication that January through May, so this is going to be egg hatch, just the beginning of egg hatch. People were seeing it primarily in Hagerstown and around the Aberdeen area of Hartford, kind of like the I-95 corridor, and over into Perryville. The Hartford and Perryville infestations are very old. Even Hagerstown, I think we found it in 2020. So those are kind of like historic infestations for us. And then the southern part of Cecil. We had a lot of other infestations in 2021 in Central Frederick, Howard, Carroll counties, Kent County. So all those places had older infestations, but they're much lighter populations. So the reporting tends to lag behind. In June, we've seen our second instars and third instars develop. Reporting is much heavier. Hagerstown, Hartford, those are heavy areas. And we have movement in northern Baltimore County and into Baltimore City. Our older infestations in Sykesville and New Windsor and Frederick counties and Howard counties are starting to kind of increase. And we always are getting hitchhikers. So we've got them down in College Park and Prince George's, way out the heck out in Assateague and just places like that. In July, the fourth instars are out and maybe a few adults. And we see that it's been popping up in Cumberland. So we had indications in 2020 that, I'm sorry, in 2021, that it had been seen in Cumberland, but we were never able to independently identify it. And as the year goes on, we see the insects have now hit the critical mass and people are seeing them out west. In August, you can see that the very light populations in Montgomery are now being reported along 270 and the Amtrak line. In Cumberland, it's spreading too. It's in all the suburbs. It's going down 220. We've got hitchhikers in Wycomico County, St. Mary's, down into Charles and Calvert too. We have to go check all these things out. So we try and get out there, do our surveys, identify if lanternfly has actually been present or not, and hopefully arrange some treatments. But our capacity in that regard is pretty limited, unfortunately. September, swarming starts. The tree of heaven is beginning to go into senescence. So that means it's going to sleep for the winter, and the lanternfly are looking for new host, looking to lay eggs, looking to mate. Our reporting in September and October goes through the roof. And as you can see, Maryland is just a blizzard of points. In November, hopefully the frosts come. The lanternflies begin to die. Usually by the end of November, they're pretty much kaput. And December adds only just a few more leftover cases. But this is what Maryland looks like according to Marylanders, or I should say what spotted lanternfly looks like in Maryland according to Marylanders at the end of last year. And I have no reason to believe that it won't be just as bad this year, unfortunately. With them shifting their populations to new areas, they're going to find new food sources and will continue to increase their population. But I'm very curious to see how the data shakes out. When we're in the field, we do a bunch of different stuff. So we do trapping. This is primarily the tool that we use to identify if lanternfly are in a new location. So we'll try and get out there, do some proactive measures to identify populations that are developing, and just survey them out from there and see where they go. We look for tree of heaven pretty much exclusively. There are no lures for lanternfly. So if people are hearing stories about pine sol and sugar and apple cider vinegar mixed together, those aren't attractors. You have to rely on host species. Put your traps on a tree the bugs like to go and hang out on, and see if they get inside. I think traps are a pretty good management tool. We don't use them in that regard. We only put out traps just to see if there's a presence or absence of lanternfly. But if folks are interested in managing their populations, circle traps placed, I think the intensive trapping regimen was like 20 every 20 meters on trees that are large enough to accommodate the traps is considered very, very intensive. You can build these things yourself, or you can buy them commercially. They're pretty easy to put up, and we just check them every 2 weeks or so, and empty out the dead bugs and clean them up. But this is our primary early warning system for lanternfly. If folks are interested too, there is space for adhesive bands. I don't really recommend them so much. We don't typically use them. If you were interested, early in the season is the best time when you're trapping nymphs as they fall off the trees and climb back up. And then Penn State has a lot of good DIY options for circle traps. Duke Gardens also put out a really good YouTube video on building circle traps. So our surveys are largely intended to go and delimit the area of an infestation. We'll respond to resident complaints. We'll kind of proactively go out and do surveys. Most of what we do is in response to the Survey 123 app that people are using, that people are submitting to. Our real priorities are new sightings, especially satellites that are way far away from main infestations. Those are small enough for us to get to and do treatments and maybe reliably knock down the populations in those areas. We also want to go and give support to at-risk agriculture. So right now it's vineyards is the big one. We've done some regulatory work and inspection in nurseries, but vineyards are getting hammered so hard that we want to provide education, outreach, and even some suppression to them just to kind of get them back on their feet. And then, infestations within quarantines too. If there's new areas popping up, even within infested quarantines, we want to try and get there and do some surveying. For treatments, Emily went over a lot of these. Basically, you got your mechanical, you crush them. You got your chemical, you spray them. You got your cultural, you remove the host. There's been some information coming to light that some people are having adverse reactions to tree of heaven. So my disclaimer is wear PPE, just glove up, put on some long sleeves. It seems like it's very rare that people have skin rashes or unfortunately the very, very rare heart condition that occurred that has been brought up several times now. That occurred because a person had an open wound and the sap was directly exposed to that wound. So, cover yourself up. Don't get tree grit inside of open cuts on your hands and arms. I think that's just good advice for anybody working out in the field. Cover yourself up and don't put tree junk in your cuts. But if anybody's curious about more specific treatment stuff, I'll just kind of leave it for the chat afterwards for questions. For us, there's a couple of different things we consider. We're looking for at-risk agriculture, satellite infestations, whoops. And what we try to do is go to areas where the risk of reinfestation is low, because it happens in a blink of an eye. The residual period for our chemicals is pretty short, so we don't want to have to constantly return to areas and just kill bugs all over the time. We want to be able to go there, hit it once or twice, and know that maybe we got most of them. We want to try and find transportation pathways. Highest risk for transmission is transportation pathways. So if we can kind of combine treatments with proximity to those locations, it's very good for us. And then we need public cooperation. So we never just show up and kick in the door and start spraying chemicals. We always secure a legal agreement from the property owner before we treat. Last year, did a bunch of treatments. These numbers aren't going to be super helpful for people without context, but basically we used to go and treat a bunch of transportation stuff. We're shifting over to agriculture. We use this dormant oil, the golden pest spray oil, to kill a bunch of egg masses, but we decided to basically shift over to mechanical removals for egg masses. We just found it was easier, more guaranteed, less messy, and we did a lot of egg killing. So 32,760 egg masses destroyed over winter between 2022 and 2023. That's a lot of bugs, and most of them came from a single vineyard in Baltimore County. One vineyard had 21,000 egg masses on it. And that's an incredible population pressure for the growers trying to raise grapes. So that's why we're in there doing what we do. And then one really far-flung property out in Tyaskin and Wycomico, we try to get out there and keep it to a dull roar because it's just off by itself. Then a lot of what we want to try and do too is outreach. So stuff like this, we really want to get into industry groups, public interest groups, make our presence known. And if people are interested in having us up here, we're always happy to do it. We've got lots of merch to go and send folks as well. And that's for, public interest groups and municipal governments or businesses. We'll always go and send out little doodads to just to keep people's awareness of Lanternfly up. Virtual appearances, in-person appearances, we're game for it all. One of the cool things we do now is geofencing. So we're add people online. We're trying to get people seeing our website online, clicking through to us, and then getting information and reporting Lanternfly. And it's been successful. It's been a really good way to spend a little bit of money and get a large effect for public engagement. And then the last one is just advertising, trying to get Lanternfly's face up on billboards and airports and things like that, and just get people aware of what this is, because a lot of folks don't know. Some do, some don't. Just an example of a billboard, had this up on Route 50 for a while, and it seems like a lot of people saw it. So we're going to do that again this year. This is a little bit of the merch we have. Actually, it's not little. It's every single item of merch that we have. So if folks are curious to have us send stuff to you, this is the kind of stuff we'd be sending. We've got, paper informational stuff. We've got stress squeezy bugs, pens, pencils, bottle openers, coasters, just lots of fun things with our contact information on it. Digital campaign was cool. We basically paid $4,000 and got the value of a $10,000 campaign, which is a pretty good deal. I'm hoping we can repeat that again this year. When it comes to people doing their reporting, it's front and center. Look us up, search MDA Spotted Lanternfly. Our survey is right out front, and you can click through to that, put in all the information for the Lanternfly that you see, and if we need to, we'll get back to you. Again, citing reports for the survey. If you have questions, go to the email. And we'll get you there. Yeah, we get a lot of emails. That's why we have to answer every single one of them. So if you're doing citing reports in addition to your questions, it can take a long time to get back to you. Be patient with us. For permitting, this probably isn't super applicable to the group here, but suffice to say, if you are running a business and you have vehicles or you're transporting goods as part of that business, you need to be permitted. This is any regulated article, truck, trailer, transported goods that has been exposed to Lanternfly needs to be inspected before it is transported. And a record of that inspection needs to be kept. So the link to the training is there, Spotted Lanternfly permit training for businesses. And it's very easy. It's like an hour video, take a test, get a permit. Only one person from a business or an organization needs to be permitted, and then they can train their coworkers on it and get squishing bugs. And that's really the thing we want to have happen is for people not to resist getting a permit because it's going to be onerous, or the inspection schedule is too much. Check once a day, look for these bugs, and then get on your way. We want people participating rather than fighting it. Yeah, it's all the stuff I already said. So my outlook for spotted lanternfly this year, we're going to stick with doing ag primarily and satellite infestations. We just can't get into residential areas. It's too difficult for us to effectively treat. Outreach is going to include a lot of public interest, media, trade organizations, and municipal governments. SLF will get worse this year. I have no reason to believe that it'll get better. The population is going to fluctuate. We see it in other locations. It'll be bad some years and it'll come, drop off a little bit, come rolling back the next year. So it's a permanent resident. People have to get used to having it around. It's a good reason not to go crazy with chemicals because you're not going to ever get rid of these bugs. It's going to be here forever. So we'll have to just go and deal with it. And the quarantine is not going to be expanded again this year. And how am I doing for time? All right, we're kind of coming up on it. So I'll just kind of keep going on through here. There's some biocontrols. The most promising one right now is the middle one, the Anastatis orientalis. It is an egg parasitoid. And it's difficult. It's kind of inconclusive at the moment. Its host range seems to be a little wide for what we're looking for. And there's difficulties in syncing it up with the spotted lanternfly's life cycle in the United States. You have to rear these insects in an insectary before you can start releasing them. And that's like one of the hardest parts after host range testing is to grow enough of these insects to distribute to local governments and state governments. So keep on plugging away at it and hopefully something will come around in the next decade, maybe. The very top one, the Oencertus cuvani, is in the field. It's been released for spongy moth control and it's attacking lanternfly. So that's cool. If folks see evidence of parasitized egg masses in the field, it'd be cool. Just take a picture, get a location, send it to us, and we'd love to go and actually get it and just document it. There's fungus. Bavaria bassiana is the only one really being looked at very much. I know UMD has a group looking at a biopesticide to see how efficacious it is on lanternfly. It seems to be pretty lethal, which is great. It's generally entomopathogenic. So it's, if you spray it as a biopesticide, it's going to kill bugs. It occurs naturally too. I think it has a fairly short shelf life when you spray it. The residual period's pretty short, but it's an alternative to synthetic insecticides, and it might be more effective than horticultural oils or insecticidal soaps or things like that. So time will tell how Bavaria is looking. The others just don't seem to occur as much in nature as we would like for them to really be a major pathogen for lanternfly. But, entomopathogenic fungus is always great if you're trying to control the pest. So here's hoping one of these things takes notice and lanternfly just becomes its primary host. And also, as Emily alluded to, we got some natives that are going after these guys. Spiders, wheelbugs, praying mantises, big birds. I think the birds biting bad bugs page lists cardinals, gray catbirds, blue jays, and chickens as the most often seen birds eating lanternfly. So, support your native predators and hopefully they'll exert some more pressure on these guys. And that's really what we're hoping for. And wrapping this thing up, to help familiarize yourself with lanternfly, know what it looks like, report it to us when you see it. We're taking reports from all over the state. I don't care if it's in Hartford or Cecil either. I know we said we weren't looking for reports from there anymore, but if you see it, report it. It helps. It's data for us. And then destroy it when you find it. We're not requiring Marylanders to do active management. We just want you to check your vehicles, make sure you're sanitary. But if folks can, try and stomp them. It always helps. And then if it's applicable to you, get a permit, make sure your business is in compliance with the quarantine order. And for that matter, if you're private residents, you can get a permit too. All the state workers do. It's good education, and it's free. It's open to everybody that wants it. But if you're operating especially vehicles as part of your business, you need a permit. And if people have questions about that, I can certainly answer them. This is our contact URL for our website, our email, and then the phone number. The phone number is for the plant pest office. It's not like the spotted lanternfly phone line, but if you call, you'll either be directed to a message system for lanternfly, or one of our receptionists will take the message for you. And just don't be surprised if you call and someone says plant protection and doesn't mention lanternfly. And that's it. So that's lanternfly in 2023 for Department of Agriculture. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you so much, Kenton. Yeah, so 2 really informative presentations today. Thank you very much to both of you. I definitely picked up on more info, and it's always great to have more data to work with and arm ourselves that way. We do have a few questions in the queue, so we'll jump on in the 10 minutes that we have remaining. So we'll just go down the line, starting with a question from Anne, who anecdotally has seen a drastic reduction in the nymph population on her property from last year. So she's curious if this is part of the unexplained movement, natural biocontrol response, or potentially something else.
So it looks like I can answer live. Emily, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in on this one. So I am
Yeah,
answering
go for it.
live. Yeah, it's a hard thing to go and say. Fluctuations in population can be a bunch of different stuff. There's probably no real substantial biological control. I think everything that's happening to them is probably a matter of food resources available and just pressure from humans, which maybe you could call it a biocontrol, but pressure from people stepping on bugs, spraying bugs, doing all that kind of stuff. And maybe some abiotic weather influence. You know, if it's super droughty and hot, you know, they die too when it gets hot and nasty.
Right, yeah, and following up on that, I think you touched on this already, Kenton, but in terms of studies or observations of what all native species are assisting as biocontrol and confirming the insect species that we saw feeding on one in Emily's presentation.
Yeah, my knowledge is just the ones that I listed in my presentation. I think the researcher is still taking submissions to birds biting bad bugs, but I think it's limited to Pennsylvania. But yeah, that's been going on for just a little bit. I don't know if there's a publication that's come from it yet.
Yeah, and I think Emily, I think your photo was of a wheel bug, which is a kind of assassin bug. So
Yep.
yeah.
Mhm.
In
Yeah,
terms of people
I'm sorry, yeah.
responding, oh, sorry. Did you want to add
You're fine.
anything?
I was going to say, I think praying mantises are the most commonly seen insect hunting lanternfly.
Right. Yeah, some of the photos you had were pretty great. So I don't know who is out there just hanging out next to their local, local fauna, waiting for that good action shot. But I'm always glad to see them. So Lowell has been seeing adult spotted lanternflies on the sidewalks around Penn Station in Baltimore City, and he's been spraying them with vinegar, which he has read will kill them. Is this something that you folks would recommend?
So I'll jump in first, and then Emily, let you follow up too. It's that live. So sidewalks around Penn Station. So first off, I would really caution for doing spraying on what's probably a public area. I would definitely not do that. If it is your property, then obviously you can go and do what you want with it. But especially not being a licensed pesticide applicator, that does tend to be illegal. So that's just that. When it comes to vinegar, I've not heard really great resource or really great outcomes with vinegar. I know when it gets to be a strong enough concentration, it can be insecticidal, but I think that's way more concentrated than like distilled white vinegar you get from the grocery store. And when it gets to be that concentrated, it's also phytotoxic. So if you're spraying it around, you're probably going to hurt plants as well as bugs. I know people have also brought up the dish detergent stuff, but at this point, I'm kind of recommending really that folks just go ahead and get a formulated insecticide. If you're looking for less toxic stuff, horticultural oils, insecticidal soaps, neem oils, I'd recommend those things just because they've actually been formulated to stick to bugs, suffocate them, or the soaps have that desiccating effect rather than trying to concoct homemade things. I think the safest homemade option is the 50-50 dish detergent and water, but yeah, no pine sol, apple cider vinegar, no pool chemicals, no fire. Don't do that kind of stuff.
The fire might be an issue for the other folks around Penn Station, so
Yeah,
you
for
might
sure.
get you might get some bad feedback on that one. I guess other recommendations aside from squishing for maybe you're not on your own property, but you want to take some kind of action, and they are very fast. So if there are, I don't know, I've certainly heard of folks using handheld vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, vacuums, fly swatters, tennis rackets. Yeah, to increase your reach and speed, definitely.
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend like the salt gun stuff or whatever those are. I don't know how they work, and I feel like that's probably a recipe for shooting somebody in the eyeball. So I don't know. I saw a
Definitely
Vice video
takes-
about that.
I haven't seen that, but it definitely takes more skill than I think I would have. I don't have very good aim.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emily, is there anything you'd like to add to that particular question?
No, I think Kenton hit most of it, which is we encourage people to use chemicals that have been certified and approved by the EPA. One, we know that they're safe. Two, they come with directions on how to use them. And three, we know that they're effective because it has to have an effectiveness through it. So going out and just spraying anything that you randomly come up with, you're more inclined to do environmental damage or damage to a property, and especially someplace like Penn Station, that's not your property, it's public. I think your best bet there is to just try to step on as many of them as you can, or reach out to the people there and see if they're already having a pest control company come in at stations. I don't know about up there, but I'm sure a lot of the metro stations probably have someone who's managing like mice and cockroaches and all of that kind of stuff. So they may be able to expand it, but you know, we're all working on limited budgets and limited staff. So it may just be letting them know like, hey, this is here, and seeing what can be done about it that way. But I don't encourage people to do their own, especially out in public places. And I will say, if you are encountering them up on the tree and you're trying to get them, a leaf blower that does reverse with a painter's bag along the top also works very effectively. It's how we used to sample alfalfa for leaf hoppers. And it's how we used to sample for brown pepper stink bugs. So I imagine it would work here as well. So you can get creative with how you catch them and then physically smash them. Maybe just not with the chemicals.
Yeah, good note. Jim is curious about impacts on other tree species, so things like oaks and hickories. So he's also seen that walnuts have been affected mildly, and is curious if this is due to chemical defenses like tannic acid.
So I don't know if you want to take this, Kenton, or if you want me to.
Have you seen the look on my face? No, I know they go after walnuts and they don't seem to go after oaks and hickories, but I don't have a physiological reason why that might be.
Yeah, I'd imagine so with the Penn State one from the maple trees, they hinted at the fact that like maple, because the maple syrup normally has that higher sugar content in their sap. So it might just be this is a preferred feeding host because more sugar, more energy and stuff like that. But they didn't necessarily do that. Kind of been able to figure out like why they have preferences over this, over that. But again, we all have preferences over what we like to eat. Some of us love broccoli and some of us hate broccoli. But if given the choice, most of us, I think, would pick ice cream over broccoli. So.
Great, thank you. Another question from Linda. How should we respond to people online who say there are too many, nothing can be done, forget it? She's encountering this in gardening groups, and yeah, interested to hear what you two would advise.
Yeah, so I'll go first. There certainly are too many in a way. I think that matters more so when you're choosing management strategies, understanding that when the population is heavy, they're always going to be a thing you have to deal with. So if you want to try and manage them, understand they're going to be reinvading once the residual period on your insecticides wear off, or as active as you want to be mechanically removing them. It's just always going to be a thing you have to go and deal with. The population will fluctuate, but that's kind of how it is. As far as completely doing nothing, hey, there's still a lot of places that are uninfested with lanternflies. So I think the kind of minimal effort to check a vehicle or a trailer for the bug before you drive away is something easy to do, especially with the adults. If you know what it looks like, you can just bap it real fast and get rid of it. And that's a management strategy right there. And you're not having to do widespread applications or, spending hours squashing bugs by hand. And it's primarily transportation pathways that they get shuttled down. So I think it is one of the easiest things to do and one of the most effective things to do to keep our other neighbors from not getting lanternfly. Because if you get them and they get really heavy, it's really nasty. But I think as far as using the population as a justification for doing widespread management, yeah, I think by and large, you're going to have to learn to live with them. So don't go nuts with the chemicals. Don't get heat stroke outside trying to squish them with a fly swatter. There's always going to be more. Unless you're trying to protect an investment. Then if you're a grape grower, you have to do what you have to do to protect your grapes.
Good point. Emily, anything you'd like to add on that front?
No, I think you're always going to have some people at different ends of the spectrum. Some people are going to be out there wanting to smush every single one they see. Some people are going to say it's here, let's just live with it. So I would, you can do some outreach, you can do some education. I think asking people to check their vehicles or say like, well, let's try to be good neighbors. And I know you're going down to Ocean City, maybe you can check your vehicle before you go so you don't spread it. I'm pretty sure that's how we got it here on the shore, was it probably came down with beach traffic because it literally jumped past most of the mid shore and went straight to Ocean City. So either they're enjoying the beach, or they came down with beach traffic. So I think that's kind of the bare minimum we're asking. And again, at some point, if you've got a gardening group, I know what I manage master gardeners, and some of them are really enthusiastic about one thing and not so much on something else. So I think it's one of those, keep reminding people that it's here. But not everyone's going to go out and smash every single one of them. And we can't ask people to do that.
Great. So I know we're actually 2 minutes over. So I guess finally we'll just have a quick answer for Joe's question about whether there are higher populations of spotted lanternfly in urban areas as opposed to rural and suburban before we wrap things up.
Sure, so I can answer that one. So unknown what the population looks like, but we have higher rates of reporting in more urban areas. The rural areas tend to not report very much.
All right, well, just wanted to thank you both again for some really informative presentations today. This was really great, and I definitely learned a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time out. I know with this topic being so hot right now, you both are very busy. So really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for letting us talk about it.
Mhm.
All right, Gary, anything you'd like to add before we close up?
Well, just 1 second, and simply I want to add my thanks to yours, to our panelists today. A very excellent job on the presentations, very informative. I'm sure you're going to get some follow-up questions based upon your contact information, and we'll make sure that's made available on the foundation website in the near future, because even in the absence of posting this webinar, I think contact information on your work is absolutely an essential part of the ongoing commitments of the foundation for the management and stewardship of our forest and agricultural resources. So thank you again very much. In closing, I want to thank all of those of you who've been in attendance at today's webinar. I invite you back on the 3rd Thursday in August for another, what we think will be very interesting topic. And let me remind you, as you tune into these webinars, that we're always interested in your input in future topics that ought to be embraced in our Framing the Future series. So thank you very much for your attendance today, and I wish all of you a pleasant remainder of your day. Take care and good evening.